Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and my guest today is Igor Kufayev. Hello, Igor.
Hello, Renate.
Igor is from Uzbekistan. He is an artist and an Advaita Tantric Teacher. He just finished a book on flowing, wakefulness, essays on the nature of consciousness in realization. Do you know when the book is coming out?
Well, we don't have a date, but the book is basically a selection of my essays, and it's being edited at the moment. So it's going to be very easy to read in terms of, it's going to be like a slim little book to maybe address key points in this whole business of self-realization based on, let's say, my own direct experience and some scriptural knowledge.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to that, and I guess we can buy it through Amazon.
It will be available hopefully by like middle or maybe autumn of next year, the latest.
Wonderful. So I met Igor this year at the Science and Non-Duality Conference I attended with Ian, and I was fascinated by his clarity and by his wisdom on the biological process of the body in awakening. And we will talk about that during the interview. And I'm particularly interested, and we never had somebody before talking on that subject, so that should be great. So my first question is, Igor, what is your view on awakening, on enlightenment? Is that enlightenment the end of a path, or is the beginning of a path? You know, there are so many different views out there. How do you see it?
Well, I think one of the, let's say, main aspects or main issues associated with this whole phenomena of what is known as, or what goes under various names, from awakening to self-realization, to enlightenment, emancipation, what have you, attainment of one's essence, becoming one with reality, knowing one's, you know, all according to the various traditions. However, I think what we are coming up against in this whole thing is that there is a limitations of language, and limitation of the language, in this case of, let's say, many of the Western languages do not have an interrupted, let's say, record, or an interrupted record of experiences of individuals and beings who have been on a path and left that, let's say, as a gift to greater humanity. Not that it does not exist in Western Hemisphere. There are plenty of examples, plenty of traditions, plenty of, you know, the whole concept of enlightenment, if one could say, is the epitome of the essence of the perennial traditions. If you take any perennial tradition, what they speak about is about attaining one's hood, selfhood, based on the true notion of being, rather than that what is experienced temporarily as this living body, as this organism, as these thoughts, impressions, feeling, emotions. So already at the start, there is this limitation there, because many people, or for many people, it means different things.
Yeah.
And even when we speak about spiritual community, highly evolved, highly developed spiritual community, and on various different levels, let's say, there is no consensus as yet. Some people just use the word awakening to denote almost a state of Buddhahood. Others, when they speak of awakening, they only speak in terms of that kind of shift in perception. Yet some people speak about self-realization as realization of what? Which self realizes what? And yet that third term, like enlightenment, which presupposes something which is innate. It's almost like return to our own light, of realization of the light that we are, simply beings of light. Light of what? Light of our own consciousness, light of our own awareness. So all these different terms they often denote phases in a process, in my view. And it's not just my view, it could be traced through, again, through various esoteric traditions. For instance, in today's climate, there is this, for example, understanding that it is enough to have that direct recognition of one's essential nature to then live life in freedom. And though it could certainly be a very liberating event, it still falls short in any case in terms of actually living that reality, other than constantly referring to something which was experienced at any given moment in time as something which could be then referred to the moment of shift or awakening or what have you. Because by its very nature, awakening is not necessarily a progressive event. It's not always a progressive experience. Someone may have a glimpse of awakening, a steer, what I call it, just a steer, and live for the rest of his or her life based on the, let's say, experiences, psychophysiologically digested, integrated on whatever level, but always with reference to something that has happened. Something has happened to me,
yes,
and I've experienced that I'm more than this, let's say body and mind, and I carry on living my life, but is it a continuous experience? Are you in a stream of that experience? Are you in a stream of awareness in terms of constant awareness that you are awareness? Right? We're just like using all this phraseology. Then again, awareness doesn't need to be aware of itself in terms of awareness itself. It's all-knowing, all-encompassing.
But
So-
there was, sorry,
No.
I just want to, I know Ramana Maharshi, which I was a big fan of, he said the only thing you have to do is being aware that you are aware. And that's all you have to do.
Yes. He said a lot of things throughout his life, and a lot of these things came through in translations and interpretations. And I personally feel that we have to be very, very aware, inevitably we use that word, how these messages were spoken, in what circumstances, to whom they were addressed, to what stage of evolution of the being they were addressed. Because very often, especially as with the existence of all the technology that we use today, you have this Facebook quote from Ramana Maharshi, and below another quote from someone else, which completely refutes the previous previous note. On one hand, Ramana Maharshi advises there's no practice needed, only that recognition. And yet, immediately after, you would read another note which would say that actually it's an ardent process. So steadfast yourself and be really press on it, you know,
Yes.
with all your might, with all your dedication, with all your ardor. The actual word ardor means something which it requires a certain effort.
Yeah.
So you see that this is what we are up against when we try to interpret certain straightforward messages.
Yes, and yet when we go back to your own process of enlightenment or awakening, and you just finished the interview with Ian at that point, where you woke up, everything woke up in you, and what came after that? What is happening after the realization and the knowing of who you are? What happens after that?
Well, as I said to Ian, that initial impact of awakening was the portal, was the entrance, was the beginning, one could say. Everything prior to that was, of course, important. Everything, every moment, every step, every breath up to that moment was leading to that. There's no doubt about it. It is very clear. Actually, the definition of awakening itself and the very experiential dynamics of it is that you recognize life that you live prior to that. Often some people call it as a story or what have you, a personal story, in much greater light. because obviously there's much more light of awareness is allowed to reflect upon what even happened in the past. And although there is this contempt for past, future, and there's this fetishization of the now, which contemporary spirituality is dominating at the moment, this awakening brings about greater retrospect in understanding the drama of life, including everything, because there are also, as you know yourself from your own experiences, that when awakening happens, there are profound glimpses of your own future, profound glimpses of what would happen to you in weeks, years, months, often, doesn't matter, as well as profound glimpses of how your own life, this biological life, was conceived. For example, I was almost a witness of direct forming of myself in mommy's tummy, you know? Like, this was granted as a direct experience to reconcile certain aspects of this evolutionary flow. And it went further back, you know, transgressing all this complex evolutionary process that consciousness vibrated with on the way to become this human body, including transgressing the state of an animal, state of plant, you know, plant formation, mineral formations. All this was like an unfolding, ongoing film, unfolding, you know, which goes in internal, kind of on internal screen, while you're in meditation or reposing, resting or walking, it doesn't matter. Because from the moment that radical shift, radical awakening took place, it carried on in greater degrees of unfoldment. Because as one layer will be peeled, yet another layer is ready to be peeled. And so layer upon layer, reality was stripping itself bare to reveal what is the innermost kernel of this whole process. But that is not an overnight process. So this is something that I often find myself talking and relating, that enlightenment, if we ever to talk about it, because there's also, let's face it, there is also this notion that enlightenment is a bogus. There's some teachers say that enlightenment doesn't exist. Where awareness, there's not one being who is not aware, because everything is empowered by awareness, and there's truth to that, that in order to function in this world, there has to be awareness at a given. So obviously it is only awareness that is aware and functions through this physiology, through this body, as this, you know, temporal expression, as this expression of consciousness. However, I'm not very kind of keen to go into this because I simply believe that this is very simplistic and downright primitive view of what enlightenment is. And also, by declaring that, we can kind of disregarding thousands of years of profound civilizations, that profound cultures that were actually built upon this very premises, where that process of self-realization and enlightenment was the most cherished concept of that particular culture. And just saying that enlightenment doesn't exist, it's almost taking a mickey out of Buddha, of Christ, if you will. To me, that's how disrespectful it sounds in terms of our own being at this present moment in time, when we are culturally still deeply connected to our ancestors. So I kind of stand on a platform of this enlightenment as an ongoing process. Ongoing process where awareness reveals itself in its self-expansiveness. This is why the title of my book, Flowing Wakefulness, it's the very, very quality of consciousness. It's ever awake and it's ever flowing.
Yes.
It's that uninterrupted stream of awareness that throbs and flows through your veins, through your heartbeat, through your eyes, into the world, out of the world. It's like, you know, it's not just expressing itself, it's also experiencing, it's also perception, expression, perception. You know, it's a very complex, beautiful process of being alive. Consciousness utilizing this vehicle of this body, this instrumentality, to experience itself ever anew. So this is why I've actually decided to agree to be called a tantric teacher, because for years I denied any association with any kind of pigeonholing or boxing in terms of, because let's face it, when true profound realization takes place, it transcends the shell or the, let's say, the form of whatever formal practice was prior to that. Mm-hmm. It transcends the entire body of the, let's say, spiritual tradition that you were standing on or using as your spiritual practice.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Not that you're transcending and disregarding it. By transcending it, you're enriching it. This is what I firmly believe, is that each time there's this happens, the tradition itself, which gives birth to that, is being enriched. It's a mutual process, very beautiful, complex mutual process.
So what is the biological process involved?
It involves...
You say,
yeah.
you say in the notes I was reading, awakening happens on a cellular levels. Mm-hmm. And there are glands involved and hormones and decalcification needs to happen to all the cells. That sounds like an endless job.
Sure. Well,
and is there something actually we can do? And what is it we can do?
Well, first, to answer your first part of your question, that this process is indeed, will only be partial, always be partial, if it does not involve the body. Mm-hmm. So this is very clear. This is very clear, and anybody who has ever went through it fully knows that this is energetic transformation. And energetic transformation encompasses being in its entirety. Or very often when we say body, I should say that very quickly, is that we only have in mind the corporeal reality of the cells.
Yes.
Consciousness which expresses itself on the level of cells and tissues, formation of cells and tissues. But that's only like not even half the picture. It's only, let's say, 1/5 of the picture, or 1/3 of the picture, 1/4, it doesn't matter. It's only a part of what really body consists, because this body also has breath, right? This body has the energetic field, or auric field as it is known in New Age. This body has also a mental layer, right? Which scientists are capable of measuring it today. There's this literally like in a Russian doll, one inside the other. Ultimately connecting us all together through that final layer, you know, the layer of the pure bliss, or the layer of the finest, you know, the fabric of consciousness itself, which Indian spirituality aptly named Sat Chit Ananda, you know, the ever conscious, ever blissful, ever, you know, knowing, this kind of aspect of consciousness as a very fabric of existence. So this is why I'm never sort of comfortable when people say body, mind. Let's establish first, what is the body? Where do we draw the line? How can we actually begin to draw the line between the mind and the body if this body is the reflection and manifestation of this mind? So it's much more mutual, much more integral, and much more interconnected, interconnective, interrelative. So that in itself breaks that conditioning of thinking of ourselves as just the body. Even in terms of spiritual realization, thinking, okay, now we're just talking about the body, and then we will be talking just about the mind. Very often, awakening, especially I'm observing in the West or in Western Hemisphere, first happens indeed on the level of the mind. On the level as this shift. First, it's understood that I'm not just this.
Yes.
And that understanding generates energy. If energy is enough, is generated. That would lead to greater internalization, which will then include greater spheres of this being, greater layers of this being. Some teachers draw parallels, and they, you know, like that, then your heart is being encompassed. And then your greater being encompassed, even your very vital, you know, the instincts and what have you, all is being encompassed in that process. So when we speak about awakening and self-realization, it's a gradual process, and it is unique to each individual, because each individual has a uniquely uniquely designed nervous system. And this nervous system connects us all. We all have this unique nervous system, but not all of us have that unique capacity to reflect consciousness in its full measure. When I say full measure, not in the measure that, let's say, because some traditions even forbid to say that this full enlightenment can happen in a physical body, because this body is not perfect yet enough to carry the magnanimity of that, what is the absolute, let's say. But those traditions that allow greater degree of that, let's say, like Tantra, for instance, speaks of that, you know, there's this very, very direct, that this soul, this jiva, this soul, is Shiva. You know, this soul is pure consciousness, pure absolute, you know, pure awareness.
I found it intriguing when you said, the enlightened is one whose nervous system can no longer be swept away by the chemical storm inside.
This is, I'm very happy you brought that quote, because this is also a reflection of what really is happening. And I always measure the process and in terms of working with people now that I find myself doing, is that in terms of the degree to which this body has integrated the awakened states that were brought by the initial impact of awakening and its progressive unfoldment. So because awakening, it's
it's okay.
Because awakening itself, if it's not followed by, let's say, progressive expansion to next level, next territory, is, as I call it, like the body cannot hold it, it cannot carry it. So it's like miscarriages it. So the body is not ready. And when we say the body is not ready, we mean the nervous system is not ready. The nervous system cannot vibrate on par with the vibrations of much, much finer frequencies. So much finer frequencies that these frequencies simply would will burst this body to pieces.
Or you can get crazy or something.
Well, you name it. You know, like the contemporary world is full of very, very dramatic cases of awakening. But in specific to what we're talking about now, in terms of the importance of the complete reorganization of the endocrine system, is that, which is reflected in that quote that you wrote, that you just read, is that all our functioning, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, all our thinking, feelings, emotions are conditioned or preconditioned by previous experiences. Take it or leave it, this is the truth. And the neuroscience and neurophysiology is doing amazing discoveries in these fields as we speak. This is the very exciting time we live in, because the body is suddenly being given a very different look from the scientific community. You know, that what is known as gut-brain reaction holds the secret of all our longings, wantings, of everything we experience in this world, all our identifications, our pattern, our behaviors, all is being recorded somewhere deep within, registered deep within, on that level where it expresses itself through qualitative, let's say, issuing of the juices into the body, which then, through that process of firing, where the brain recognizes these impulses that come from the body, and then through the process of, you know, it's all electrical, obviously, and I'm not going to go through the scientific explanation of that process, but it's just like this connectivity happens in the brain, and soon as that connectivity happens, because it recognizes that experience that was previously experienced and left sediment in the subconscious, and now coming up in the form of wanting or desire.
Like, say, a trauma.
Trauma, but it's joyful and sorrowful experiences.
Every experience,
is then triggers a certain electrical reaction in the brain when it produces a qualitative hormone responsible for a particular reaction in our body towards what we've experienced before. So if, in a way, it's like a catch-22.
That's right.
You know, that's what in a way, a biological view of samsara.
Yes.
There's no other samsara in terms of the mythology and lore. That is the samsara on the internal level.
Yeah.
The samsara on the level of the internal alchemy. So, in awakening and self-realization, if there is enough energy, if awakening is powerful enough, this whole mechanics are being shattered. Literally shattered to a degree when they dissociate. And brains, for a time being, cannot provide that usual connectivity. It is very important because this is why newly awakened spiritual aspirants often are thrown into the stages known as dissociative disorder of all kinds. Why? Because simply what they used to know is no longer functioning. What I mean by that, that even reaction, for instance, there is a joke and everyone is laughing, but you're not laughing because it does not make that connection in the brain. Doesn't register, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been witnessed, yes, but it does not provoke any reaction. It's not because you're not funny anymore, because something more important has happened. Likewise, those experiences that we held dearly, or the traumatic experiences that were sitting there and not allowing us to experience life fully, also, in the same way, the connectivity is being shattered. So whenever there is this re-experiencing of something which ought to give you pain, fails to do so. So you see that is why many spiritually awakened beings, they live in that state where they almost like withdrawn from the world of emotions, feelings, thoughts, because nothing makes sense anymore.
No motivation.
No motivations, exactly.
So how do you help these people? What do you do with them?
Well, before we start helping them, we need to understand that this is part of a very healthy process. Why healthy? Because this is like almost wiping canvas clean, or wiping the board clean, or what have you, or clearing the windows of perception. Because up until this sediment is brought to the surface, right?
Yeah.
Up until this is being all shattered within, up until we caught in that vicious circle of, desire, like this intent, desire, then action, reaction, experience, again, seed of desire, intent, so on for the next cycle. Up until that circle is broken, we will continue doing the same things. If not in this life, it will be passed through into the next life, and so forth. So that process itself is very healthy, because that process allows nervous system to free itself from all these experiences, positive and negative alike, because what we call positive and negative, at this moment, in the referential, let's say, scale of what we're applying at the moment, is losing its acuity. So
let's just, and that happens because the neurotransmitters don't connect anymore.
Yes, because the information
is passed.
failing to produce the hormones which will ignite that thing again.
Right.
That cycle again.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yes.
So therefore the nervous system is free.
Yes, nervous system is free, and this is just left to its own to vibrate. It's a very good state, very healthy. However, because when you said, so what do we do to help them?
Yeah.
Because it does become unhealthy when these beings want to, or ought to, or have to come back and function in the world. And when we say come back, there are many scenarios. Not just come back from the ashram where you, let's say, doing your duty, washing your dishes, and in the profound state of bliss, and you don't care about what is happening, But I'm talking about awakening can happen anywhere, and it does. It happens in the midst of Broadway, and in the midst of, Hampstead Heath, in the midst of...
I interviewed somebody, it happened to her while she was washing dishes.
Yes. Well, there are many, many different awakenings, and so sometimes people are in a position when they don't even have that, let's say, I call it luxury, of allowing the integration to take place. And it could be quite dramatic. The family could be involved, children often involved, you know. So what do you do? So all these very, very important aspects to consider. But in terms of how do we help and what can be done, it is very important that there is greater integration for the individual who, let's say, at the moment, we're referring to that condition, is being caught or found himself or herself in a state of spiritual bypass, in that dissociative disorder. Because in that state, you are kind of like coalesced by that beatitude, you know, by that often, well, it's good actually if you are in that beatitude and bliss, because some people don't experience yet that. And we can also address that, because sometimes awakening could happen, can throw one into the, so to speak, the stratospheres of the much more refined layers of consciousness, where there is no wanting, but there is no desires, but also there is no much happiness, no much light, no much bliss.
It's a desert land.
Yes, it's a very, yes, exactly. It's a very desolate land, and it's like not very nice place to hang out. The one who is at least lost in bliss, at least there is this very, very nice place to be. And this is very important phases where one should seek help in terms of the guidance. And it's a very different guidance that we speak about for someone who is not yet saved, and for someone whose consciousness is still in a latent state. There has to be tremendous amount of inner wisdom to drive that process further, to go without a preceptor, without a guide, because you don't know where you are. You don't know what is next. Very often people mistake it even that for the completeness of self-realization. People think that this is it. And some people are disappointed. It's the stories of Zen masters being smacked back by the disciple. Is this all there is? You know? Like, so, but there is more to it. There is much more to it. So that whole phase, it's only an interim. It is the phase. It is the phase where the repose or return will make all the difference. This is when, if the process has enough momentum, and I'm not using Sanskrit, let's say, or tantric vocabulary today, so that we don't lose that part of our audience that are not versed in the terminology. So I'm using it in a very, very simple kind of like basic language. So when the energy is ready to move into its next stage, much more refined stage, that's when the repose happens. And that coincides with the involvement of the whole entire physiology of all the cells in the body, where literally, the whole body produces a new, qualitatively new chemistry. So new connections are being made. For that reason, spiritual practice is very important, and this is a reply to your other part of your question. Because if prior to that there was enough, let's say, spiritual, let's say, grounding, then one would have that possibility of refinement of perception. Refinement of perception allows instantaneous tapping, intuitive tapping into the greater spheres, greater areas of that process of self-realization, when all this so-called magic will be spoken within, unfolded within, the guidance and the direction would be offered. But very often we are not. Very often people awaken with not much preparation, with very little preparation. So there is a lot of stir, right? A lot of like shattering, let's say, taken place. But consciousness and nervous system has not been structured yet. There's very little to lean on. Everything is in a state of havoc. And in that state, you need to have that guidance, very careful guidance of how to integrate these awakening processes into its next qualitatively higher state where it can grow again. Because I am emphasizing again and again that awakening, it's moving from one plateau to another plateau. Mm-hmm. And there are distinctive states of consciousness delineated by great masters to help, to map the process. Some teachers disregard it completely, saying that all this is nonsense. Awareness is aware everywhere equally.
Yeah.
There is some truth to it, but the referential point is different. We're not speaking from the point of view of absolute. We're only speaking from the point of view of this very incarnated life right now. So the difference is vast, the difference that makes all the difference.
So my question, Igor, is, with the alchemical process, some teachers out there, and you know, I'm a student of the Diamond approach, and that was basically we used inquiry, and the inquiry was, I guess, the chemical process you are talking about, because you are you learn to take an emotion, and you do not react on the emotion. You sit with the emotion till it drops and something else reveals. So does that somehow, is that what you are talking about?
Okay, I must confess I'm not intimately familiar with the Diamond approach,
No,
but I've heard
yes.
Almas speaking about it at the last year's conference, and I haven't read his books, but I know that he's a very, very credible master, and there is like a, I know people who, let's say, his followers, you know, so that I have tremendous respect for those people who, to start with, so that already an indication of that approach as being validated through direct application and results. But it sounds to me very similar to what is being utilized in what is known as many other traditions, you know, like the tradition of Tantra, for instance. And the one that I sometimes speak from, just to give people a great understanding, particularly the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, where there are many, many different approaches, many, many different methodologies to supplement, let's say, the main practice, which is always rooted in meditation, because that's where the process of self-inquiry is the most refined, because it is where the process of inquiry itself gets transcended. But there are other methodologies, you know, involved. There is, like, for instance, there's a very great field, great area of the quality and the nature of the aesthetic experience itself, how the actual experience of beauty itself is very transformative, which we know. But in terms of, in relation to the spiritual aspirant, in terms of someone who is awakened, let's say, you know, that experience is what helps to connect to the inherent, what is called, or what is known under the name Platonic values. The Platonic values that, let's say, the closer to the light of awareness, the more spontaneous is our actions in coherence with the environment and in coherence with the rest of creation. It is not something, it's not acting upon the 10 commandments or any other codes of conduct, internal, external. It's not about yogic yamas and niyamas. It's much more. It's actually invoking and evoking, enlivening that field within ourselves, within our own consciousness, which is already structured through these Platonic values, through these fundamental qualities of consciousness as love, compassion, care. All this already exists within. And when we speak of these qualities of consciousness, we do not, of course, mean this much more, let's say, emotionally oriented states, which are, you know, we're not talking about love today, hate you tomorrow, you know. Compassion here is the compassion of Buddha. Compassion here is the compassion of Christ. It's irrespective of the situation of the one to whom compassion flows. It's not about how poor or how rich you are. The compassion, the true compassion of Christ, as we know, is the compassion towards the soul being caught in that drama. And that being caught in that drama is, it doesn't matter what worldly situation is. We all are caught in this drama.
Yes. So in your own, then what you're saying, in your own awakening, you never looked at you never had to look at your emotions or unclarities that all got cleared out in the moment you awoke?
If I speak personally,
yes.
there were definitely moments of clearance. Absolutely, there was, it's impossible, it's inevitable unless you are born a saint.
Yeah.
And there are beings like that, I'm absolutely convinced. There are beings who came here with such pure, refined nervous system, what it means, like pure souls. They don't carry much luggage. But they usually put immediately at the service of humanity. The rest of us have to work. The rest of us have to apply some effort. The rest of us have to be disciplined towards getting to the bottom of it all and peeling the layers. So yes, it was happening, and on the wake of awakening, the territories that were unleashed were really deep, something which I didn't even know existed. But thankfully and gratefully, this was all, once the grace does its work, grace is all there is, and it's done very gracefully. It literally frees you from the burden of doing it yourself. This is why I personally, I don't want to sound skeptical, so it's just a limitation of the language. I might come across like that, but I prefer the methodologies which based on energetic transformation through that kind of process of surrender rather than more psychological applications. But it doesn't mean that they're not valid. They're valid in their own right. It's just in my experience, it is much more, let's say, integral and also conducive to this whole process. So like when you surrender,
so
you
surrender to what?
It doesn't matter to what. You decide what you surrender to. Because there is always some kind of, even formless has form.
Yeah.
You have a teacher, you have teaching. One always has something that one cherishes as the focal point of one's sadhana or spiritual practice.
Yeah.
So once you surrender, it could be a Godhead in a very abstract form. Very often it's not easy to surrender to the abstract formless because many teachers actually try to implement that. Funny enough, it happens mostly in the Western hemisphere with Western teachers and Western audience. But I see immediate limitations there because it often creates mood making and attitudes rather than the true surrender.
So can you tell us what true surrender means?
It's
because I'm not sure if I know that. How did you surrender? How did you?
I had no choice because that what resisting to surrender was absolved by that process. You see, so that what could have put up the fight was powerless. If I were to put it in that allegorical metaphor, that which could have picked up the fight was powerless.
Okay, so it's like, thy will be done.
Yes.
That is the ultimate surrender.
Yes, it's the ultimate surrender is that you basically, you die before you die, and that total acceptance of everything, and not just acceptance itself that I'm accepting or not accepting. It's the fact that there is nothing one can accept or not. That's the true nature of acceptance. There's not even up to us to accept or reject. The ultimate nature of acceptance is much more subtle. You can accept this, but that presupposes that you may object to accepting that. But the true acceptance is that when you are not even the one who is accepting or surrendering. So this is what I call the total surrender. It has no choice. It's a choiceless choice.
Yeah.
And it's an act of grace. It happens on its own. So there is not even effort on the part of the individual. It's only required to drop certain resistance. Because when that energy is awakened, the only what stands on the way is those resistances. That which still resists that. But then when the realization dawns that that which resists is also part of that process, it's also part of that energy, maybe some kind of like the waves that bound on the furthest shores and coming back and they become counter waves, but they're still part of that process. So what is there to surrender? What is there to fight against? And that where the true calm and the true quietude and peace descends or reveals within. And again, so that it doesn't sound too abstract, it is a byproduct of awakening of that energy which does its work by an act of grace. And the only thing we can do is to allow that process to unfold. And when I say allow, I don't want to be misunderstood here. It is a participation, a willing participation in that process. All I did, I sat as much as I could. All I did, I sat and gave myself to this fire, gave myself to this fire repeatedly. If there is anything learned and burned, let it burn. Let it be digested. Let it be completely, because if it's not, then it always does. If one seed is left unroasted, it will give sprouts. Mm. And from one seed, the tree can grow. Mm. This is the kind of like, the Advaitic metaphor of the samsara. The tree of samsara can grow from one seed.
Is there still something in life which can knock you off?
Remains to be seen. I mean, I'm being knocked off every day in small and big waves, but it's different. It's like when you have that, when you understand that the knocking is my own doing as consciousness, then how can you knock you off? Because in order to be knocked off, you have to have point of reference. Yes. All references are being dissolved.
Yes. So then, in enlightenment, what happens is that identification is shifting.
One could say that that's one of the phases, because if we speak of a process of enlightenment, self-realization, I regularly give that kind of a triadic perspective. And if we are pushed to summarize it or narrow it down to this, I would say that there are three distinctive stages.
Yes.
And those who will see this in light of their own traditions, I'm almost certain they will recognize it despite the fact that maybe traditions are far apart. And namely, first phase or first stage, it's the actual shift which happens from a realignment of all the energies, all the pranic flows in the body, where what is known as body-mind consciousness, right? Consciousness which identifies with this particular individual. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's called in American spirituality egoic consciousness. I don't like that term particularly. I think it doesn't really portray it fully, but let's we'll get away with this for a moment. So it's like first, it's the shift from the ego-oriented consciousness to the consciousness of the self, not from the capital S. In Indian spirituality, there is a term known as Atman.
Yeah.
Atman. Individual self. In Christianity, it's a soul.
It's the soul.
It's the recognition that you are not just this body, you are also soul.
Yes.
And it's a very important recognition. So in the energetic transformation, you actually live that. You become a living proof of that realization. Mm-hmm. But it's not a conclusive state by any standards, although many people think that it is. Mm-hmm. And that's where often development could get arrested, because if you identify this as that's what it is, I am the soul, as opposed to the body, then it's as if the momentum is, as if the energy getting deflated. You know, there is not enough force.
Yes.
But if there is, then that force takes that recognition of Atman, or that soul, towards greater recognition. And that is the recognition with supreme identity, or known in Indian spirituality as Brahman. And thence this line, which encapsulates it. Atman is Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
But before that recognition can take place, they have to be shifted first from what is known as ego-oriented consciousness towards Atman first. And I find that in modern spirituality, many teachers insist on expecting the seekers to jump from the space of egoic identification straight to Brahman. Mm-hmm. And you cannot bypass that territory, because then you are in danger of a lot of undesirable events, namely as depersonalization, because you don't know, you think you are this formless absolute awareness, uncontainable.
You think.
You think, exactly. You know, you might have glimpses and momentary experiences.
Yes.
And you already disregarded that plateau of Atman. Mm-hmm. You already disregarding your individuality, the unique flavor of each soul. Mm-hmm. Like in Sufi tradition, it's beautifully expressed over and over. It's that lover and beloved. It's that relationship, it's that dance of the lover and the beloved. And that dance continues for as long as it has to continue before the emergence will take place. So rushing that process often results in deep unresolved psychological tensions, tendencies, and spiritual bypassing, which these people, when they're put into the test of real life, they cannot stand it. Because that is not the real fruit of self-realization. That's not the real self-realization. It's only aspect of it. And if it happened in that way of the bypassing, then you will still be asked to return and do your homework.
Yeah.
So this is why I never demand and never advocate this kind of complete disregard of your individuality. Your individuality has purpose. It's another face of Shiva. It's another face of awareness. It's a face of awareness for this world. It's not up to you to say that it doesn't exist and smudge it. You did not paint it in the first place.
I liked it. Yeah. So those are all the 3 stages?
Well, if we succulently put them, but the 3 stages, like let's say from, in terms of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's science of intelligence, creative intelligence, they are correlative to the 3 highest states of consciousness, one could say.
Yeah.
You know, the cosmic consciousness, the God consciousness, and the unity consciousness. In many other traditions, you will find the parallels. It's that move, you know, it's that it's that transformation, ever-expansive process when this contracted, from the tantric perspective now, this contracted state of pure awareness into its expansive state. But it happens in stages. And in fact, it contracts and expands at all times. We're just not aware of it.
Yeah. I think we have to stop now, Igor. I think it's a beautiful place to stop.
Yes, because we can only touch, and we can only introduce this thing.
Yes.
This thing is vast.
And I hope you come back to Conscious TV. There's so many more things I would like to.
I would love to.
Talk with you about. Yeah.
I'd be, we're more than happy to do that.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Come all the way to us.
I'm very, very honored to be here. And very humbling experience.
Thank you, and thank you for watching Conscious TV. And I just would like to say the title of Igor's book again, which is coming out soon, which is Flowing Wakefulness, Essays on the Nature of Consciousness and Realization. And thank you for watching Conscious TV, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Igor Kufayev, and I'm here today just to show some very, very basic principles and very basic, let's say, exercises which might help you in your meditative practices. It is based on some of the tantric, traditionally explored experiences, and one can find these exercises as part of the overall tradition from Tibetan Buddhism to, let's say, many other tantric traditions where it is still alive. It is very simple. Nothing is required from you except a place where you can sit calmly and quietly, preferably where you can sit with your spine erect, like I'm sitting now on this kind of sofa, and not slouching too much back. You can sit with your legs crossed. If you cannot sit, if it's not comfortable, you can sit on the floor even, back yourself up with the cushions and stretch your legs forward. You can sit in a normal chair. It's all acceptable. It's perfectly fine, as long as the posture is steady, comfortable, and allows you to experience this very subtle process of transcending. Now, just a couple of words is that meditation is not something that we do. Meditation is just as natural as breathing. In fact, meditation, truly speaking, is what empowers all other processes in the body. It's just we've forgotten about it a little bit. So for that reason, these very practices were reintroduced into our life so that we can reconnect to the very essence of our being. So once you are seated comfortably, before going into meditation, I would like to ask you to close your eyes gently and for a moment just observe that inner space of your own body. I would like you to pay attention to the very solidity of your body, how this body is connected to a place where you are sitting, so that you feel that sheer gravity, that body is being in that very motionless state. It's a very pleasant state, very relaxing. Let's just sit like that for 1 or 2 minutes. Keep observing how your awareness gently becomes internalized. Pay attention if there is any discomfort in the body, if there is any tension. And as soon as you discover that, ease it up, relax into it. Maybe adjust your trousers if you're wearing, like whatever belts, and do that. Whatever maybe causes discomfort in terms of your clothing, make sure that you adjust that. If the tension is based in a particular part of the body that has got tired, let's say you've been standing all day walking and your spine feels a bit tense, just breathe deeply into it. Inhale and exhale through that place where you feel the tension. Literally, like visualize as if the breath goes all through your body and exits the place where the tension is. Now today we're going to be doing little exercises locating where the incoming breath confluencing and mixing with the outgoing breath before it will be drawn in again and goes in to sustain our life force. In fact, this very breath is the life force that is sustaining us. Just as the cosmic life force, soon as it enters the body, it becomes individualized. So here is the point of connection. As you draw in the breath of air, just gently follow it up and see where it fills the cavities of your lungs just before it will be expelled again. Exhaled, expelled again. And don't pay any attention to any particular point. Let's just follow the breath. Inhale and exhale. And again, inhale and exhale. Now, what I would like you to do is, just as you are drawing in a breath, notice a place right below your rib cage, somewhere where the diaphragm is, between the rib cage and your belly button. There is this place where the diaphragm goes spontaneously in and out, because that's what happens naturally. When our breathing subsides, when our breathing becomes natural, the diaphragm moves by itself. There, in that place, deep within, there's a place where the breath subsides for a moment just before it will be exiting the body. It is known as the internal point. Don't worry if you cannot locate it right away. Suffice that you feel that diaphragmatic expansion and contraction. It moves in and it moves out. Somewhere there, when the breath goes in, it stops, and just before it is expelled, that point is where I would like you to drop your awareness. And let's do it for a few minutes. Just let's do a few incoming and outgoing breaths. And as I said, do not try to strain, do not tense for a moment. Suffice you roughly locate that point somewhere below the rib cage where the diaphragm goes out before it contracts spontaneously in. And again. Now, just very gently shift your awareness, move your awareness from the internal, from the body that was prior to that, focused on this point, and inwardly into the outer space. Literally, suddenly aware that this very body, this very solid organism, It's very steady organism, your body, beautiful, sitting here in silence, is surrounded by this utter space, utter transparency of this space that the body is suspended in. Just bring your awareness there and forget about the solidity of the body. Just feel the space around. You see that very same awareness that was just a moment ago dwelling in the body internally is effortlessly witnessing that spaciousness around the body. It is the same awareness. Just a shift. Don't worry about external sounds. Don't worry if thoughts come and go. This is all part of that natural, spontaneous process. No resistance. Now, as we continue in that simple exercise, as our breathing becomes more and more natural, I want you to notice that place where you exhale through your nostrils, preferably, and before you draw in a fresh breath, fresh air, there is a point where the exhaled air literally touches a point before it becomes the inhaled air. Something roughly 5 to 7 inches from our nostrils. Drop your awareness there. So these 2 points, the internal and external points, they are aids in meditation. Regardless of what tradition you practice, you can always utilize them as the intro to your meditation. It helps to pacify and create a very steady ground for your continued practice of meditation, whatever chosen form or format of meditation or methodologies you use. And as I said, do not try to locate these points too hard. With time, you will recognize them as the very essence of your own being, because that is where consciousness literally becomes your physiology. Happy meditations.